Hey, seventh grade, I just dropped y'all. Sorry about that. But anyway, we're back to finish off the section we've been studying on the age of imperialism, and want to remind you once again that your time for the Zoom meeting on Wednesday will be 11 o'clock. I will send the codes for that. Probably email and Gradebook Wizard so you can get into the meeting. That'll be your chance to ask any questions. I can hit you with review questions, kind of let you know, the format. So try to make that if you can. That's 11 o'clock on Wednesday morning. I look forward to seeing y'all there. Yesterday, or the last lesson, we ended on the types of imperialism, and today we were going to start off by talking about the partition of Africa, and a man that became famous exploring Africa was a man named David Livingstone. He was a Scottish doctor and missionary who explored Africa for over 30 years, and he set up Christian missions and sent detailed reports of discoveries to Great Britain. So he was there exploring. He was also setting up missions. We talked about that yesterday. And of course, the reports he had that went back to Europe were of great abundant resources. And this sets off a race for Africa during the late 19th century into the early 20th century. 1885, 14 nations met in Berlin, Germany, and agreed to divide the African territory. So when they knew all these riches were there, resources, that's a lot. 14 nations deciding they were going to carve up a continent. The French in North Africa, they were involved in this as well. And in 1830, King Charles X of France ordered an invasion of Algiers with the aim of colonizing that country. In the years that followed, about 1 million French people settled into North Africa. And we talked a little bit about yesterday how the countries would want to send their own people to these places they colonized to take their customs, and then they felt like stabilize it in their favor. But that was King Charles X, and then once again 1 million French people followed to settle in North Africa. 1859, French entrepreneur named Ferdinand de Lesseps set up a company to build the Suez Canal, which would connect the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. This is a pretty big deal. You're going to need to know what the Suez Canal is and what it does. The importance of this is it becomes a waterway that becomes a vital link between Europe and Asia. And we talk about exploration. We've talked about some of the explorers, Magellan, Columbus, in previous sections, and what they were looking for and trying to find new ways, new routes to Asia, new routes to trade in goods. There was no quick way. And this became a link between Europe and Asia that really became a shortcut compared to the way that it had to be done. But anyway, you will need to know that, the Suez Canal. The British gained control of the Suez Canal when Egypt sold its canal shares to them to pay off their debts. And that's how Great Britain came to have control there. Italy would get involved as well. They would take over Tripoli and rename it Libya. Libya became the last country in North Africa to be conquered, and Italy was one of the last European nations to get in on colonizing in Africa. I guess they didn't want to feel left out. The territories they did try to take didn't necessarily have much great value, but nonetheless, they did get involved as well. In West Africa during the 1600s, West African states traded slaves to Europeans that provided labor for plantations and mines in the Americas. So this is where a large part of the slave trade obviously came from. When we talk about slavery in America, slavery existed in the slave trade in Africa, and they found willing buyers in the Europeans that needed that labor. So you'll need to know that was heavy in the west coast of Africa. And during the early 1800s, many nations declared an end to the slave trade and abolished slavery And the slave trade continued as traders sent slaves to the Middle East and Asia. They sort of turned that way to keep the slave trade going. A lot of the Western nations were against slavery. A lot of the Western European nations started to lead the charge to abolish slavery even throughout the world, not just simply in their own country. So a lot of them started by just abolishing the trade and then outright abolishing slavery itself. But a lot of the African countries continued the slave trade. Once again, they turned to the and Eastern nations to do so, to keep the trade going. So, and at the time, you know, a lot of them probably thought, hey, this is the way it had been since the beginning of time, and trading slaves and having slavery. A lot of them thought that was weird, that the Western European countries would come to have an attitude like that, you know, they would look to have it outlawed or banished. But worldwide, Great Britain would be a leader in this, in that. But anyway, you'll need to know that in Central and East Africa, 1877, explorer Henry Stanley reached the mouth of the Congo River. As a result, Belgian King Leopold II claimed the Congo region as his own private plantation. And he enslaved the Congolese people and had them cut down forests for rubber trees and kill elephant herds for ivory tusks. So he kind of used it as his own personal gain, really. And he was probably pretty rough on them, to be honest with you. Not just the people, but the resources. But you'll need to know that. You'll need to know about King Leopold II. The only country in East Africa to remain independent was Ethiopia. They didn't get there by luck. They had to fight for that. But they had a emperor named Menelik II, and he was emperor when Italy tried to invade them. And at the Battle of Adawa, this is 1896. It's listed in the date in your notes. Menelik's well-trained troops crushed the invading Italians, and they did it so completely that none of the other European nations would try to invade Ethiopia during Menelik's reign as emperor. During his lifetime, they didn't get it in. So he set a pretty good example there of what's going to happen to you if you try to come in and conquer his country. So, and at the southern end of Africa, Dutch settlers came to South Africa in 1652 and established the port of Cape Town. The Afrikaners, as the settlers were called, created Cape Colony. And before the Suez Canal, which we had talked about a little earlier, the quickest route to Asia from Europe was around the Cape of Good Hope. That's at the southern tip of Africa. So you had to go, that's where you went. That was your route. You had to go all the way down the west coast of Africa and below it to get over to Asia. But it was due to this importance, the British seized Cape Colony during the Napoleonic Wars. That's a pretty important area to hold if you're at the southern tip there and you're at the stopping point of ships and the travel and the trade from Europe to Asia. That kind of gives them a place for supplies, take a break, whatever that you need to have. So you will need to know that. And the Afrikaners, whom the British called Boers, Boers, resented British rule in the 1830s. About 10,000 of them left Cape Colony and decided to migrate further north in the interior of Africa. So the locals did not like that when the British came in and ruled, and there was conflict there for a long time. Now, it's not something we study in this section, but war erupted later on called the Boer War, named because of that, between Britain and the South Africans. But this is where we'll stop on the notes for the test on Thursday. Okay, so once again, look these over. Anything you don't understand, any questions you might have, any terms, anything of that nature, please make a note. And then on Wednesday at 10 o'clock, Wednesday at I lost my train. 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock is going to be y'all's Zoom meeting for review, and hope to see you then.